Hey, Sad, are your bags packed?
I am ready for the Asia CrossFit Championships in Shanghai this weekend.
Yeah, boy. But before we go, we want to talk with Ed and get his thoughts and ideas about how he preps his athletes for this competition.
That sounds like a great idea.
So you know what we're going to do? We're going to sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode.
What's up, y'all? My name is Sad.
And I'm Hightower.
And you're listening to Trust the Podcast. And welcome to a brand new episode of Trust the Podcast, a platform where we bring together the latest information around fitness, wellness, and health. And I'm your host and personal interview specialist, Sad, and I'm joined by my co-host, Steven.
Oh, what's going on, y'all?
And we are recording live from Coastal Fitness, and today we have a very special guest. You missed him. He was here the whole open. Ed Haynes.
Hi guys.
How you doing, Ed?
I'm fantastic. Great to be here.
So glad to have you on the show.
And too bad we don't have any visuals, but Ed, of course, is looking really good. Nice tan.
Thank you.
You've been taking care of yourself. So in today's episode, we sit down with Ed to discuss how he's getting his athletes ready for the Asia CrossFit Championships. And before we delve into that, for people that might not know Ed, which is not a lot of people, he's very known. He is the founder of Coastal Fitness Performance Training, head coach at Coastal Fitness, competitive fitness geek, and part-time CrossFit athlete.
Yeah, bang on.
Nailed it.
All right, so Ed, before we start talking about how you're prepping your athletes for competitions and specifically the Asia CrossFit Championships, which is going to be happening this weekend in Shanghai. We're all going to be there. I'm very excited about it. How do you feel about it?
I'm pumped.
Right?
A brand new challenge. I'm really excited for it.
Is this going to be your first time in Shanghai or?
No, I was there running an athlete camp a couple of years ago.
Oh, cool.
But apart from that, yeah, never done a competitive bout of fitness as a coach or an athlete in Shanghai.
Yeah, it looks pretty amazing.
It's a cool city.
But before, we should maybe explain to our listeners what the Asia CrossFit Championship actually is, maybe.
Yep, so the Asian CrossFit Championship is one of the 16 sanctioned events. So a sanctioned event is basically an opportunity for athletes to qualify to the CrossFit Games. So as we know, there's a new format to the season. So in short, there are 3 ways to qualify. Number 1 is that you win your country in the CrossFit Open. So currently Ant has taken that place. We're waiting for official invites, but he was the fittest man in China and therefore he's got a ticket to the games. The next way to qualify to the games is if you finish top 20 in the world in the CrossFit Open. And then the third way is you win one of the 16 sanctioned events. So this is now, I'm not sure which one it is out of how many we've had, but we're getting later in the season because the games is in July, so we don't have too long now. So the athletes competing in this competition, the top ones will be looking to win the comp to get their ticket to the games.
Mm-hmm. So it's very exciting.
It's a big event.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds like a...
I mean, I would hands down the biggest event CrossFit has seen in China.
Yeah. Wow.
Relative to the caliber of athletes and what the significance of the competition means.
Yeah.
So it's going to be cool.
It's pretty cool.
It's woke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. So you have some athletes going. I don't know what that means actually. So you have a couple of athletes going, right?
Yes.
Tell me about those athletes.
So we have Ed Haynes and we have Isabel Wolf. They're my 2 athletes, but we also have representing Coastal Fitness. You have Katie Reggett and Alex Younger. So Katie she's in our S&C program, which is awesome to see that she's just crushing it and making it to these huge competitions. And obviously Alex is one of our coaches.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a team of 4 people going, which is I think incredible, great representation for the gym. But really my 2 athletes, Isabel and Ant, 2 very different goals. You know, Ant technically has his ticket. We're pending on verification there, but he has a ticket to the games already. So for Ant, this is kind of his last real arena-based competition to prep him for the CrossFit Games. Mm-hmm. This is kind of like a practice run for him. Winning is not the most important thing for us. It's not our goal, but you know, he needs to get that nice reminder of what it's going to be like to compete at the games. Isabel, this is by far the biggest competition she's ever done. She's a young athlete. She's new to the sport. And this is the first big competition we've done together. So this is just going to be a really exciting learning curve for us. Mm-hmm. But with no real kind of placing expectations or qualification expectations. That's not the goal,
That's pretty cool. So just focusing on what you guys can control and just, you know.
Yeah, so we actually had a really good chat today talking about, you know, what what's success? How do we define success in this competition? It's something we always do with our athletes. Defining success for Ant is, performing his best. But he still actually has a chance to win these type of events. He's not far away from a lot of his other competitors. So for him, like, he's hungry for victory, and he wants that. So it's kind of like it's a double-edged sword for him. He wants to do his best, execute his strategies like we planned in the run-up, but also like he wants to do well in the placing.
There's a purse, right? Is there?
Yeah, I think it's not been disclosed just yet, but there will be prize money, and all the prize monies of the previous ones have been fairly lucrative, and he's putting a lot of his eggs in one basket right now. He's really throwing a lot of being a competitive athlete, and when you're a competitive athlete and this is your livelihood, you have to think about prize money. It's part of what gives him income to actually be able to do this stuff. So there's another motive there for him.
Absolutely. There's something I noticed about him before we delve into the behind the scenes of how you program for your athletes, etc. Is that his mindset has changed significantly from being first in China. I feel like he now realizes he's got a bit more confidence, it seems. I don't know. I just feel like he's more like, I
think a lot of it was, since we started together, and he did a great episode with you guys on this podcast. I thought that was an awesome episode. And if you haven't listened to it, you should definitely delve into that to kind of understand Ant a little bit more and where he's been on this journey. But it's been a 5-year goal for him to get to the CrossFit Games. Since I came on board 4 years ago, that's also been my goal to get him there. So the Open was there was a lot weighing on the Open, because he had to win the Open to get his ticket. And so I think almost, whilst still invites haven't been sent out just yet, so we have to take this with a pinch of salt, is that, now he's got through the Open, he achieved his goal of winning China and did it really well. I guess the pressure's probably off a little bit, but it's definitely by no means is he like resting on his laurels. He's hungry for more. He's hungry to execute Asia CrossFit Champs. He's hungry to give it the best shot at the CrossFit Games and get as far as he can. So by no means is it kind of just an experiencing for him. A lot of people get to there going like, well, I'm just going to enjoy it now. He's been competing at a really high level for many years. He's been to regionals 5 times, I think it is. So like, he's not, the whole experience of being side to side with games level athletes is not new to him. So that kind of novelty is worn off now. For him, it's like, it's time to perform on the big stage now. Yeah. So it's exciting.
That's so cool. Can't wait to see it. So we'll go into this episode. So our goal is to get a little bit more insight on how you prep your athletes pre-comp, and especially with this competition coming up this weekend. So what is the difference? Let's start there, because we used to do the Open Series a month back. What is the difference between prepping someone for the Open with regards to prepping someone for this competition, the Asia CrossFit Championships?
Yeah, great question. So I think when it comes to prepping someone for a competition, you have to understand what the competition itself requires of the athlete. So probably the biggest difference between the Open and the Asia CrossFit Championships is that the Open is done in the comfort of your own gym, on your own schedule, in your own time, whereas the Asia CrossFit Champs are now an arena-based event. So you have a big crowd watching, you have heat times, you have official judges. There's a lot of things that are outside of your control. You're against competitors and lane next to you rather than the Open being by yourself most of the time. So then I think that's one part of it, the actual live simulation of the actual event being very different. But secondly, I think the tests are generally a bit different as well. Whilst it's all unknown and unknowable, so a lot of it is just based on predictions, but based on previous CrossFit Opens, we kind of have an idea of what an athlete needs to be good at if they want to excel in the Open. So, if I was to condense that in a nutshell, kind of lighter to moderate loads, high volume gymnastics, be ready for maybe one heavy event, but generally they're going to be fairly inclusive in terms of tests. Now, yes, that's evolving and changing a little bit over the years, but that's a kind of a general assumption we can make. Now, when you go to an arena-based competition like Asia CrossFit Champs, the options are endless. There's more events, firstly, spread over 3 days. Often these events are in big arenas, which means things like running and swimming and everything else you can imagine are viable options now for tests. Generally backed by big equipment sponsors, so they can have more tools to use to test athletes. We just need to be way more prepared, and our preparation needs to be a lot more varied going into something like an arena-based comp like the ACC.
That is super interesting, right? I didn't even think about all these small things, and it's so true. And so how do you approach programming for your athletes based upon these unknown factors that could
So
potentially come in?
I think there's many different rabbit holes we can probably go down there. But the first thing, as soon as the open finished, we basically had six or 7 weeks to start prepping them for ACC before we'd actually be on the competition floor. So basically what we did was that we knew that the run-in through the open was pretty brutal for Ant and Isabel, specifically for Ant because he had a big goal riding on this. So kind of we put him through 8 to 12 weeks of pretty brutal prep for the CrossFit Open. He then executed. We had a quick deload for about a week for both of them. And then that left us 6 weeks. So what we did out of those 6 weeks, we prioritized, okay, 2 out of those 6 weeks, the first 2 weeks after the Open, we're going to do some rebuilding. So we're going to touch on some things that we haven't touched on in a long time. So structural balance work, unilateral work, so single arm, single limb work, some basic energy system training. So we've kind of less mixed modal type stuff and more just basic stuff, breaking down movements that we think are priorities. And so basically took a lot of the intensity and some of the volume out in that first 2 weeks. Let the body and mind kind of recover so that after that 2 weeks, they're both hungry for more. They're hungry to get stuck into some hard training to prep them for the ACC. So basically then that leaves us with 4 weeks out into the ACC. So it's a fairly short prepping period because for both of them, the open was the priority. So if we think about it, for both of them, open being the first priority. For Ant, if he made it, the biggest goal then was the CrossFit Games. So ACC is kind of like, it's important, but it's not the most important thing. So you have to bear that in mind. So really, is 4 weeks optimal prep for the ACC? No, not for anyone. But it's enough to make meaningful adaptations and changes to allow them to perform as well as they can on game day.
So, because what can you establish in 4 weeks?
Yeah,
right?
great question. So the first thing we did, we looked at our schedules.
Okay.
And we knew that the competition was going to be running on a Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So immediately what we did, we changed our training schedules to be, all right, Saturday, Sunday, Monday are going to be hardest training days for the next 4 weeks. So that starts to at least simulate and kind of get their minds and bodies prepped through the week. All right, I need to be up for it so that I can really attack a Saturday, Sunday, Monday session. So then Tuesday became a rest day. Wednesday, Thursday became kind of like, all right, we're going to touch on the priorities, some things that you both need as athletes that perhaps we won't include in the weekend. So that would be lower intensity, lower volume. And then again, we're going to get back into the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and we're going to crank it up a little bit. So the whole idea of like creating habits and rhythms for the body and mind to become accustomed to, that's the kind of idea there. So that's definitely one thing we can start prepping. With those actual weekends,
Smart.
We deliberately made the training hard. Like I wanted them to be finishing Monday feeling like they're in a bit of a deficit, in a bit of a hole. So pushing harder than we normally do. You know, sometimes when you're in a general training phase throughout the year, and let's say you're doing a Saturday, Sunday, Monday training session, you get to Sunday and you're feeling sore and everything's hurting a little bit, you're feeling tired, your sleep wasn't great. You know, as a coach, I'd probably say, all right, well, let's just take it easy on Monday. Let's just kind of ease back into it. Let's restore your sleep. Let's restore your energy levels. Make sure your gut's functioning. And then we'll get back to a hard session on Tuesday, Wednesday. In this scenario, you can't do that because this is real life. This is what it's going to be like. And competition is probably not going to be the most ideal settings for you. And you need to be ready to be able to to perform regardless of how you're feeling. So definitely like the guys, or everyone who's been doing these simulation weekends has been finishing and feeling pretty below normal. But that's part of competition prep.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, it's a fine line between health and performance.
Exactly.
Right?
So you started off with these simulations or changing the calendar because so usually they don't really train on. So you've completely changed the way you programmed for them. The actual days mimic the days of competition.
Yeah.
How do you find that line between burning them out and making them prepared?
Yeah.
For the competition?
So actually, over the 4 weeks of doing this, each week got a little bit harder.
Okay.
So week 1, we didn't just go from a 2-week deload period into completely smash them. It was kind of like, all right, well, we're going to be doing 6 sessions over 3 days. So the training's going to look a little bit different. Rather than being like A, strength work, B, assistance work, C, Metcon, for example, it was like, all right, over the next 4 weeks, your Saturday, Sunday, Monday sessions are going to look like this. You're going to do a warm-up. That's going to be anywhere between, 10 to 30 minutes long, depending on what the workout is. And you're going to do that in a confined area with minimal equipment. And then before you get into your workout, you're going to rest 5 minutes. because most competitions have a holding bay where they make you stand still
So
and do
true.
nothing. So I want you to get used to that. Most of us just want to warm up right until starting and then hit it because that's what feels best, but that's never what it's like in a competition. So a 5-minute holding bay, and then I want you to set the floor up like it's going to be an event. So often in events, they'll ask you to move your barbell each round or move your box after every 10 reps. So
or like you run to your station.
there's a start mat and
Yeah,
a finish mat.
yeah.
So basically for the last 4 weeks, you've actually been practicing that. So they're actually getting used to the whole idea of what it's going to be like in
Wow,
a competition.
that's
And,
amazing.
those are small nuances you have to think about.
Also
So-
judging, right? I've
yeah,
seen you
and
be very strict
maintaining
about judging.
maintaining high standards with what we're doing. So sometimes, and I'm not there to kind of judge every single session. We've all got our own things to do. But if I'm in the room and they're halfway through a simulation type event, I may just shout out no rep for no reason, even if it was a rep, because that might happen on the day, and you've got to be able to adjust and adapt and not let that throw you off your game a little bit. So there's more than just the actual timing in terms of the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, but the actual stimulus of the training sessions were very much like things that we'd probably see at the competition.
Okay.
We even thought about timings. So the time between both of those guys train multiple times a day. We've looked at the schedule once it got released. It looks like on day one, you're going to do event 1, you're going to rest about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and you're going to hit event 2. So we've actually been simulating that with our AM, PM workouts as well. So they hit their AM workout, deliberate rest in the gym. You can't go out and sunbathe or shop and do whatever the hell you normally do. Like
Yeah.
you're going to sit there in the gym because that's what it's going to be like. Make yourself learn how to chill out and bring yourself back into the zone again. 2 hours later, hit event 2, and then finish your day, go through your cool downs and whatever you need to do to come back and be ready for the next day.
So how's it gonna look this week? So over the course of the 4 weeks, you've been increasing the intensity, right, progressively.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen now? Is there gonna be are they gonna rest before they go into the competition this weekend? Or
Yeah, so we had last weekend, so we're now Tuesday. So not this weekend just gone. The weekend before that, we did a full simulation. So that we had 4 events that had been released. We hit those like as if it was competition with as much intensity as we could. I then created 2 workouts that I thought would be similar to what might come out, because it's really important to give them a 3rd day of testing because they need to be ready for it. Okay, so then the next week rolls around. So there's a weekend we've just had. So for Ant, I spoke to him. We've done a lot of big competitions together. I asked him, what did you want to do this weekend? He said, I want to go through a full simulation. So I said, okay, cool. Like, did you body and mind feeling up for it? He said, yeah, 100%. I think I can still get a bit. We can fine tune our strategies a little bit here, and it's worthwhile for me. So cool. And you're going to do full simulation. And, he trains with so much volume and intensity throughout the year that I'm not worried about him not being able to recover from that. Like, he's so experienced with this kind of stuff. He knows how to listen to his body. With Isabel and Katie, and Alex actually, we actually reduced their volume a little bit. So the events they felt like they really wanted to do a full run through because they weren't quite happy with their strategy or wanted to just kind of feel what it's going to feel like again. They did full run throughs of those, and the ones they felt more comfortable with, we just did like a broken down version of it. So they did like, maybe 50% of the workout or a slightly altered variation. So we're just basically preserving physical, mental, and nervous system health for them.
And so you make this decision depending on the type of athlete or the personality of the athlete. How do you make this
I think you
decision?
just it's just about, I guess it's a relationship you have with your athlete and knowing what they're like. I can have a very different conversation with Ant than I can with Izzy, given that Ant's been in the sport for so long. I can almost speak to him like he's another coach. Well, he is another coach, right? So he understands, to probably a more technical level, what we're looking for when it comes to tapering and peaking. And, if he's feeling good and he understands that the goal's not this weekend, it's next weekend, and he still wants to hit it, like I have full trust in that. Sometimes I'll need to put like a coach's hat on and be like, well, I'm going to maybe disagree with you there. Let's find somewhere in between where we're both happy. That was it. Yeah. It's very hard, it's very case dependent, but it's just knowing your athlete. There are so many contributing factors as to what might allow someone to handle more volume than someone else.
Just one last question with that, and then I'm going to give the mic to Steven because he has some very interesting questions to ask as well. Is there have been workouts released by Asia CrossFit Championships, and you've mentioned that there's also workouts that have not been released.
Yeah.
How do you make the selection of the type of movements and workouts that you think would come up and then program for your athletes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you understand this
Yeah,
question.
yeah, absolutely. So it's basically kind of like, looking at the movements that are typically tested in high level events. And so obviously we have six or eight other sanctional events that's already happened this year. So I can use those as reference points. Plus like regionals in the past and the other events similar to this that have happened. And basically, we had 4 events released, 2 that hadn't. Well, what movements haven't been tested?
Okay.
But also similarly, you got to think about the athletes that I have and what do I actually want to test them on. I don't want to just give them 2 workouts that they're really with movements and time domains and intensities they're really comfortable at, because that's not really going to challenge them. I want to find something that's going to stimulate them, it's going to push them, but it's also going to be realistic to what's going to be tested. So, you look at all the time frames that have been tested, you look at the energy systems that have been tested, and look at the movements that have been selected and try and find out, all right, assuming that the event organizer is thinking about balanced fitness. What I mean by that is assuming that they're trying to find 6 tests that are a little bit different that will find the fittest athlete. I'm going to take that mindset to create in this last day of competition. So that's what we've done the last 2 events.
Mm-hmm.
So they've actually just released event 5.
Okay.
Just last
Was
night.
that close to your prediction or no?
We got handstand walks.
Yeah.
That was about it.
Okay.
But it was a slightly, we did an obstacle.
Okay, cool.
But this is kind of like a rope climb, handstand walk,
Yeah.
chipper kind of. But that's not too much of it. That's not a very taxing workout really. So we'll probably actually do a run through tomorrow of that. That will be kind of like our last big hit out. And then Thursday we'll just be doing like, small skill technique touches. Friday, a rest or a swim based on how they're feeling. And then get ready to hit it Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
So you guys are leaving Wednesday?
So we're going to leave Wednesday. So
Wednesday.
We'll get a session in Hong Kong in the morning, and then probably just like a flushing recovery based session on Wednesday evening in Shanghai.
Yeah.
Thursday we'll definitely get into a gym as well, based on how they're feeling, maybe an AM PM session or just one. And then Friday probably full recovery and just start prepping ourselves physically and mentally for the competition.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to throw a couple questions at you.
Please, Steve.
Ed, when we were prepping for this episode, there's just a couple questions that came into mind. They might be specific, they might not be, but hey, we're just going to have a good time. All right. So my first question, this is more a cynical question. I'm an injury prone person.
Yeah.
So that's where this question is coming from. Because Ant, sprinkled with a little bit of salt, potentially may have qualified for the CrossFit Games. With this competition, are there pros and cons? And I know we touched on this a little bit already, like some of the pros being, competition experience, etc.
Yeah.
But the risk for injury, right? So you get into a competition setting, you tend to put 110% in, and like you ignore the little wiggles and niggles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the pros outweigh the cons here, given what I've detailed?
Yeah, I mean that's an awesome question. It's always a balancing act. Is it worth taking the risk, or do you want to wrap your athlete in cotton wool and preserve them as much as possible for the actual competition? I think in Ant's case, we're thinking about the games here. I think it's worth it. I think the risk outweighs. Sorry, the reward outweighs the risk here, because he's someone who trains with almost competition level intensities throughout the year. We wave through high bouts and low bouts, but generally speaking, the competition intensity that's going to come this weekend, he's ready for, because he's frequently putting himself into that zone. So, a lot of people will compete and finish a competition weekend and feel more drained and more sore than they ever have done in all the simulation weekends running up to it, because they've just suddenly gone 110%. Anson never feels more sore, never feels more drained after a competition, because he's actually, I genuinely see that he puts himself into that position a lot leading into it. Is there a risk? Like, there's 100% a risk. If Ant was a more injury prone athlete or had some movement dysfunctions that, overexposure of a certain pattern often leaves them in a less than ideal state, then we'd have to think about it a little bit more. But generally there isn't really any movement in the sport so far that we found that kind of is a dangerous movement for him, I guess.
Okay. All right. Next question. During the actual competition, you're going to be there, and you will be as the acting coach for both Ant and Isabel, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you got 2 different athletes. You got a male, you got a female. I don't know what Izzy's headspace is like. but I'm curious as to what you foresee your role is primarily with these two individuals on the floor. Meaning, do you feel like you need to be more of a cheerleader, or are you like breaking down strategy? Just what do you think?
I've actually had the conversation. I just had the conversation with Isabel today in terms of what her expectations of me were for the weekend, because this is our first competition together. She didn't really have any. She'd never been to a comp with a coach. She's kind of always gone solo. So this will be kind of like a bit of an experiment for both of us. I'll kind of lay out the day before probably what my expectation would be, what I think I would like to provide to her. But then, really it's just a conversation, an honest conversation to say like, hey, I actually prefer to be a little bit more left alone to my own accord, and I'll just be a sounding board. With Ant, that's kind of how it is that, we've just been through 2 weekends of preparation. There's nothing really to speak about strategy anymore. There's nothing to talk about with regards to nutrition and mindset. He's got all that stuff dialed in. So really, like, there'll be small things like keeping my eye on heat times, keep making sure like they're in the athlete area, they're getting through their cool downs, they're going through their warm-ups at the right times. A lot of times I'll just be kind of sat observing and just kind of to be a sounding board if they have any questions or they just want to talk over something last minute. But really just making sure they're staying on track. But at the end of the day, all the hard work's been done already. There's nothing strategy-wise that needs to be discussed unless they kind of throw a curveball out on an event. A lot of times I like to kind of watch some of the other heats and see if athletes are doing things that we hadn't thought about perhaps. And then, perhaps we'll take that into the warm up and play around with things. But generally speaking, these are good athletes. They run on autopilot when they get put into this environment, and there's not too much that I need to do there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right. One more question from me. Outside of watching your athletes compete, who are you most excited to fanboy out on while you're in Shanghai?
No, actually, genuinely, I'm always so impressed by supreme levels of athleticism. So there's no one in particular that I'm kind of really excited about seeing. Like, it's cool that Brent Fikowski is going to be competing because he's the guy who's achieved a lot on the sport and doesn't really fit the norm of what the CrossFitter looks like. So I'm actually just excited to see him compete more than anything. In terms of fanboying and getting autographs and photos, I'm not really into that kind of stuff. But I'm just excited to see them on the floor and see how they go about business.
Lauren Fisher. Okay. Yeah, that's all I got, my man.
Awesome.
Let's get on to the
listener question.
Great.
Of course. We had thousands of questions.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds and thousands of questions.
Almost broke the internet.
But we dialed it down to 2.
Yeah, and we pulled these from the Instagrams.
Instagram.
Yeah, okay.
At trust_the_podcast.
Well
the
said.
official Instagram.
Well said.
So the first question is by my good friend Facundo, who is part of the aerobic capacity seminar, who works alongside Chris Hinshaw, and who will be in Shanghai as well with Froning. As he asked the question about individual event 3, and we'll talk about what that event is. How do you prep an individual for event 3 with less than a month out?
Mm-hmm. So what is event 3?
So event 3 is the 6,000 meter bike.
C2 bike, yep.
Oh, this is
4,000 meter row.
Yep.
2,000 meter ski.
Yep.
I've done that one.
Yep. It's a great question. 3 weeks is really not that much time. So when we talk about developing physiological adaptation, so actually getting someone be able to be able to perform better from a physical capacity, it's tough. I don't think a lot of changes can really be made in 3 weeks, given that we're also trying to prep people for 5 other events that are very different in nature. So what I mean by that is that this test is very aerobically taxing in nature. It's almost like a pure test of aerobic capacity for about the 30 to 35 minute time frame, whereas all the other tests in this event are on the same day. You have anywhere between 5 to 10 minute tests. So what I mean by that is if the test was by itself a 6,000 meter bike, 4,000 meter row, 2,000 meter ski, 3 weeks you could probably make some meaningful adaptations if you just really honed in on that energy system and made some logical progressions throughout the week. So you're getting touches on it kind of 2 to 4 times a week. But because we've got 5 other events to really focus on as well, I think that's just an important caveat to mention to start with. I definitely think there's things in terms of pacing. So for a lot of people, they probably haven't done this exact order of exercises for this exact amount of distance. And therefore, I doubt there's anyone who's going to walk into this event first time doing it and nail a perfect strategy. So for sure, like we've had our guys do it 2 to 3 times and they've always improved in their time. So little things on that is like, finding the correct pace on each piece of equipment, talking about transition times, talking about fueling, pre, intra, and post, talking about warm-ups, talking about like technique in terms of like strokes per minute on the rower, seated position on the bike, kind of like stroke cadence or strokes per minute on the ski. Like there's so many variables that you can kind of fine tune to allow someone to go better and faster without actually making them more fitter. So I think, that's kind of been our approach there, is that, well, in the next 3 weeks, we're not really going to get you any fitter, but there are 10 other things that we can dial in to allow you to move faster for this exact workout.
Amazing answer. That's a great answer. Thank you so much.
That is the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. You heard it here, folks.
Second answer by my good friend Tian Botha, who is a coach down in Bahrain.
I love your pronunciation.
Yeah, Bahrain.
Enjoyed that
It's
as well.
Arabic. So how did you find out Ant's maximal recoverable volume as a coach? How do you find that?
Do you want to
out?
define maximal recoverable volume
Yeah.
first?
Would you want to define it?
Yeah, so basically it's the maximum amount of volume you can throw at an individual and ensure that they're still recovering from it. Is basically what we're saying here. So, the easiest way to define that, if you're someone on the outside looking in, is like, all right, well, if I give this person this stimulus, this training stimulus, are they still getting better? Or have I given them too much that they're actually going backwards and they're not improving, they're plateauing, or hopefully not, but they're actually getting worse. CrossFit being such a varied sport that has so many different movements and contractions and energy systems that you're training constantly, it's very hard to have a specific formula with regards to tracking someone's MRV. So if you're training a weightlifter, for example, and really a lot of our training in season might just be snatch variation, clean and jerk variation, squats and some pulls, for argument's sake, it's much easier to track how many repetitions are done on a daily and weekly basis. And you can, keep track of that to ensure you know exactly where someone's MRV is. Does that make sense? With CrossFit, there's just so many different inputs that I think you need to be a little bit more subjective when it comes to tracking someone's MRV. So what I mean by that is like looking at things outside of the actual amount of repetitions done or the amount of intensity used, amount of volume done, but doing things like, all right, well, is sleep quality still good? Is your gut health still solid? Are your energy levels good? Are you needing stimulants throughout the day to get you through your sessions? Are you motivated? Are you excited? Are you happy? Are you getting stronger? Are your numbers going up? And that doesn't necessarily mean like when we test it, but just generally when you see in training, like, are you able to hit the same percentages or weights week on week? And if you start to see declines or decreases in any of those things, then perhaps, it's hard to say whether you've hit their MRV because this is life. There are just so many other contributing factors that dictate whether someone can progress or not. It's not just the training. So I think a lot of people who just use the training stimulus as a way to dictate whether someone is adapting and progressing is fairly naive.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many other things that Ant has to do as an athlete, like coach, like run his own business, his social media and his YouTube. He has personal relationships. He has a family. He has all these other things that continually are stress inputs into his life that could dictate what happens on any specific day of training. So, in terms of, to answer the question, it's really hard, but we need to take a much more holistic look at Ant as a person, not just as an athlete in the training he does, to ensure that the training that we give him is appropriate to ensure he's progressing. So what I mean by that is that if for whatever reason the stresses outside of the gym become higher than normal, then it's important that he communicates that with me and I acknowledge that, and then we decrease the volume and intensity of his training.
Perfect. That's great. Super interesting.
It's a great question, but it's definitely not a black or white answer.
I almost want to throw an example out, right? So he was talking about it's almost hard to quantify these contractions. So for instance, let's just say you take, you have somebody do a row, a heavy ass row, like a 10, they put on setting 10, and you have it do it for like 15 seconds. Those contractions, are those squat contractions? Are those hinging contractions? Are those pulling contractions? You know what I mean? And you can have all kinds of little bit of situations like that where you don't necessarily know how to qualify that particular contraction. So it's almost, it's a moot attempt to even try to do that. So like you said, focusing more on perception and how they're feeling and all that kind of stuff.
I think without getting into this, but a really great training tool that we use a lot is using the idea of auto-regulated training, which is whereby, you give the athlete the option to do 3 sets or 5 sets based on how they feel. That was just an example. But if they're feeling good on a certain day, and it's just the right day to do 5 sets, go for 5 sets. If you get 2 sets in and it's feeling way heavier than it should, then I want you to do 3 sets today. So we're giving the athlete the optimal dose response based on how they're feeling on that particular day. So we use that a lot, especially in like a peaking phase now, whereby you just may be feeling down the dumps some days, you may be feeling amazing some days, and you gotta give the body what it wants on that day.
Perfect. Love it. Yeah. I know that you're going to be doing an event in Shanghai. Could you elaborate on that before we close down this episode?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I'm going to be partnering with the guys at Emperor CrossFit. We have a few of our athletes who follow our program over in Shanghai. Great dudes, but they have attended my athlete camp in the past when we went over to China, and they actually put the idea forward to kind of host myself as a guest at their gym to do a talk on stress management, which is kind of what we just dived into a little bit. So
when is that going to be? Which day?
That's going to be Thursday evening at Emperor CrossFit at 7 p.m. I think they're getting, and this is no word of a lie, but I think they are fairly close to capacity.
Okay.
But if you are interested in attending, search for Emperor CrossFit on Instagram, shoot them a message, and Oscar will book you in for a slot.
Awesome. Any last words, Mr. Stephen Hightower?
I'm sorry, I got my mic cut out.
No problem.
I just want to say, hey, thanks again for another great chat to Edward.
Thank you.
And to Sad.
Thank you guys.
I had a flashback.
Always
to
a
the
pleasure.
Open.
Yeah.
Right?
I felt like this was week 3 at the Open. All right, that's all I got.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in, and stay tuned for more information about Shanghai. We're going to be going down there. We're going to make some cool vlogs and footage, interviewing athletes, and keeping you guys posted.
We got a couple of hopefully good interviews lined up, and we're going to try to video vlog ourselves, and stay tuned.
Yeah. Peace out.
Peace.
See you guys.
Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Trust the Podcast. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, don't forget to hit that follow button or subscribe button. Also, we've just started a YouTube account at Trust the Podcast. So check that out. Hit that subscribe button. Show us some love. We're going to be putting some behind the scenes content and our podcasts on there as well. Without further ado, I'd like to leave you with just a little quote that I found on the interwebs. A flower does not compete with other flowers. It just blooms. Until next time, guys. Holla!